I'll get the easy one out of the way. Marco Rubio is going to be confirmed as the next Secretary of State. That is going to happen. I am just the one to inform you of it. The whole experience was so cordial. And if they spent half the time that they spent backpatting Marco Rubio to ask him about the specifics of policy towards Ukraine, I would have appreciated that a lot more. But instead, we got a lot more backpatting because Marco Rubio has been a senator since 2010. And so that means he's had 15 years just about to get to know these people. And in that time, they've gotten to know each other. They know each other's families, have gotten to be colleagues. And so they're quite friendly. And not only are they quite friendly, but Marco Rubio in that time was working on like the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And so he's focused on a foreign policy section. And so he's friends with the senators who are voting on him. He sat down and met with many of them, including the Democrats, when Pete Hegseth, for example, was not meeting with the Democrats up here. And, he was able to answer the questions that they did pose. And he did have a decent amount of knowledge because he does research the issues, because he does care about this. He does care about foreign policy, focus on foreign policy, even if I disagree with his foreign policy. So I think Marco Rubio is going to be the next Secretary of State, guaranteed. Pete Hegseth, I think it's, if you had to put a gun to my head and ask, I'd say it's likely that Pete Hegseth gets confirmed. Now, considering that Pete Hegseth is getting confirmed when he wouldn't really answer much, if any, of the questions directed towards him. That's not to say he didn't answer any of the questions, but a lot of these questions that were directed towards him that could have been negative for him if the rumors around him are true, he would just avoid. And what I mean by that is a question would be like this. It'd be like, on X date, so-and-so accused you of drunken conduct in an X-humiliating fashion at work. Or so-and-so accused you of sexual harassment at X date. And it would be all, and these accusations would come out, and they'd say, is this true? And he would say, scandalous, anonymous lies and smears. And then the follow-up question would be, okay then, but if someone had done this, would that disqualify them from serving as Secretary of Defense due to the lack of morality of the behavior? And he would just say like silly hypothetical. He wouldn't answer it. He'd either dodge it, and he would do the three-piece combination of redirect, deny, and then basically move to shift it away from this area of conversation. And that made it very suspicious for me, because that's the answer you would give if it is true, but you don't want to say it's true because it could hurt your chances. But if you also say it isn't true to try to help your chances, and they have a clip of it and it gets released, or they have evidence of it, then it's going to be even worse. And so Democrats might be trying to catch him, and it was the Democrats asking these types of questions. And so he just decided to dodge, because a non-answer, even if it looks scurrilous, it looks scandalous, it's still potentially better than if he was to answer and give up the fact that he did, or lie and then be caught later. Of course, it could just be that he's a Fox News host and he doesn't want to ever play defense, and so he has to always play offense. Or it could be some other factor, but that was particularly suspicious. He also didn't know what ASEAN is, which is a coalition of 10 Southern Asian states economically together, Thailand, Cambodia, to help manage regional issues economically, keep stability in the region. He just named a bunch of countries that weren't in it. He didn't know what the organization was. There seems to be a lack of knowledge, and that's not to say he doesn't have any basic knowledge about foreign affairs. It's just to say that he is a grunt who then worked at some veterans organizations numbering about 100 staff, and he's now trying to be a defense secretary for 3 million people for a budget of around roughly $900 billion. In fact, it'll probably go up under Trump. And under those conditions, can he lead? Can he lead, having never served in the government before, outside of the role of infantry, and he worked for these veterans groups? It doesn't really make sense to replace a 4-star general for somebody with no experience, and his most recent job was just like Fox News host. So I mean, I think that he could still lose due to that lack of experience, but I've heard from the Hill rumors of certain people like flipping, and we saw from the hearing that one of the women that were hesitant on appointing him from the Republican side has flipped in favor of it, and so I think it is likely. But moments like this is concerning, to say the least.
President-elect has attacked our allies in recent weeks, refusing to rule out using military force to take over Greenland and the Panama Canal, and threatening to make Canada the 51st state. Would you carry out an order from President Trump to seize Greenland, a territory of our NATO ally Denmark, by force, or would you comply with an order to take over the Panama Canal?
Senator, I will emphasize that President Trump received 77 million votes to be the lawful commander-in-chief of this country.
We're not talking about the election. My question is, would you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally of Denmark?
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never in this public forum give one way or another direct what orders the president would give me in any context.
That sounds to me that you would contemplate carrying out such an order to basically invade Greenland.
The thing is, the honest answer here would be, I will do what the president directs me to do because he's president of the United States, and that's my job. Now, there is moments where you could deny an order from the president because it's unconstitutional, something like that. And Mark Esper pushed back on the president. And that's why she's asking this question, because Trump's previous defense secretary did push back on him when he wanted to deploy the 82nd Airport, did push back on him when he tried to make decisions that Mark Esper thought were unconstitutional or blurry on the legality, and he gave pushback. Can Pete Hegseth, who is not a four-star general, who's would not be nominated under any other presidency outside of for the fact that he's loyal to Trump and he's a media man and Trump cares about that type of stuff. This is not somebody with a particular skill set or history that would lead you to think that this man would be particularly skillful at defense secretary. So this is a man who has a job because Trump gave it to him. This is a man who has a job because Trump gave it to him, and I wouldn't get it under any other circumstance. And Trump is a man who prioritizes political loyalty, and I think that this is a man who has yet to show that he would break with that political loyalty. So I think he would answer that he'd probably just do what Trump said. But the problem is if he says that, even if that's the answer, and he could even say it in a politically correct way, like, hey, guys, like, my job as defense secretary is to carry out the orders of the president of the United States in defense of the country, and so if you ordered me to do that in defense of the country, I would do it. That would be like the honest answer, and you could say it in a way that's like seemingly nonpartisan. But the problem is answering in that way in any fashion, if it's not only Trump saying that crazy stuff, but it's also the people around Trump, that's not good. Not good for the confirmation hearing. Also, I will say that personal angle on by Tim Kaine was just hard to watch. Also, briefly, during that hearing, even though there's a lot of critiques I could give to Pete Hegseth on his knowledge on certain areas, for example, when it came to Asia, there's areas of critique I could give when it comes to how he didn't answer questions. There's areas of critique you could give when it comes to certain fiscal mismanagement accusations that have been made against him. J.D. Vance actually came out and made a kind of a veiled critique of Pete Hegseth becoming defense secretary when speaking with News Nation. Not saying him directly, not mentioning his name, but mentioning a quote he said. Because during the committee hearing, he was asked multiple times about Ukraine, and he said, look, the policy of the president is that we want peace. Now, it's clear that the president knows who the good guy is and who the bad guy is, and we want to make sure the good guy is in the best position possible. Now Pete Hegseth said this, and I don't think he's like lying that that's his position, because previously in the war, his position was even harder. In fact, I think he's probably moderating his position in order to be part of the Trump team, especially as the conservative movement has generally swerved away from being more favorable towards Ukraine in the polling numbers, even though, generally speaking, most Americans overwhelmingly still support Ukraine. Now, that's Pete Hegseth, though. That's not J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, when he was running for Senate, right after Ukraine was invaded, said he didn't care about Ukraine. This is somebody who's never cared about Ukraine. And he expressed as much on the campaign trail. And while campaigning for Donald Trump, he went after Zelensky, he went after Ukraine a lot. He wants to cut the cord, and he wants to cut and run. And he's willing to sell out as much Ukrainian land as necessary to do it, to get peace, I think, as soon as possible. He's willing to basically concede whatever. That's my belief of J.D. Vance, from the way he's talked about it. Now, J.D. Vance referenced Pete Hegseth's mention of Ukraine as the good guys, and apparently he didn't like it.
And Russia shouldn't have invaded Ukraine in the first place. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians are exhausted. They're both struggling to find men, because primarily men in those countries that are fighting the war, but they're struggling to find women too. They're struggling to get the equipment necessary to send to the front lines. Their economies are exhausted. Whole parts of their country have been destroyed. Both of these parties want this war to end. And I think, unfortunately, you've got a lot of American leaders who like to beat their chest and say, well, this is the good guy and that's the bad guy. Look, yes, Russia should not have invaded Ukraine, but we are where we are. And what's in the best interest of America and what I believe is in the best interest of Ukraine and Russia is for the killing to stop.
Now, look. I think it could be in reference to it. Maybe it's not. I could see how it could just be in reference to this broadly. But it does show that there are still lines into this administration of people like Vance who don't care at all, people like Hegseth who might care a little bit, people like Waltz who care, I think, more. And then those in the Senate like Thune who I think support Ukraine. Those in the House like Mike Johnson who is marginal at best. And it's going to be a real ideological clash in the administration. This is why we always talked about it as a flip of a coin. Okay, now let's continue away from Pete Hegseth, away from Marco Rubio, and let's look at some clips from some of today's and earlier today, like 12, 13 hours ago's hearing, where Senator Sanders was asking Congressman Lee Zeldin, who is a Republican congressman that Trump has appointed to head the Environmental Protection Agency, about climate change and the combating of climate change, considering that Lee Zeldin will be the EPA head for a person who does not believe climate change is real.
Congratulations on your new title here. Mr. Zeldin, thanks so much for coming in the office the other day. I enjoyed our chat. Mr. Zeldin, 2024, as you know, was the hottest year in recorded history. The past 10 years have been the hottest 10 years on record. We have seen in recent years unprecedented firefires in the West Coast and in Canada, and we're seeing the horrific situation in LA right now. We have seen unprecedented flooding in China, displaced millions of people there. Unprecedented drought in Brazil, Africa, and elsewhere. And in Southern Africa, people are dying because of the drought and their inability to grow crops. Billions of people have been sweltering in Europe and elsewhere in unprecedented heat waves. In the midst of all of that, President-elect Trump has said that climate change is a hoax. You will be, if confirmed, one of the leading spokespeople in this country, representing us throughout the entire world. Do you agree with President-elect Trump that climate change is a hoax?
Well, first off, Senator, it was great to meet with you as well. I believe that climate change is real, as I told you. As far as President Trump goes, the context that I've heard him speak about it was with a criticism of policies that have been acted because of climate change, and I think that he's concerned about the economic costs of some policies where there's a debate and a difference of opinion between parties.
I would respectfully disagree with you. I think he has called it a hoax time and time and time again.
Wait, what was it? What was Trump's position according to Lee Zeldin?
The context that I've heard him speak about it was with a criticism of policies that have been acted.
No, wait. Let me say the context. He was saying that climate change was made up in order to implement bad policies that undermine the United States, i.e. green energy instead of good, beautiful American coal and natural gas, right? And oil. Like this is was his position that China invented climate change to undermine American manufacturing and production and energy. That this is a big scheme just to undermine our economic productivity. That was his position. Now, if you disagree with the things that were decided regulatory-wise that lower productivity in your eyes to help protect the environment, then you can just say that instead of making up a goddamn fairy tale about climate wizards in Beijing in order to explain away your lack of regard for the environment. There's no need for this charade.
Because of climate change, and I think that he's concerned about the economic costs of some policies where there's a debate and a difference of opinion between parties.
I would respectfully disagree with you. I think he has called it a hoax time and time and time again. And I would just say for the record that, and let me ask you this question, all right? Some of us have used the word existential threat. What we're seeing in LA right now is apocalyptic, and the other terrible weather disturbances, whether in the Midwest of this country, whether in many states that are represented right here, unprecedented floods in my small state of Vermont. We've been hit over and over again in recent years. Our state capital, Montpelier, was underwater recently in a way that we have not seen. Would you describe climate change as an existential threat, meaning that there must be an urgency to get our act together, to address it?
Senator, we must, with urgency, be addressing these issues. And today, as we talk about any way at all that the EPA can do.
That's answer or non-answer. It's like he was asking if he was an existential threat, and then he moved on to the urgency to kind of explain why he wanted to know, and then he just went on to that. But it's an answer or non-answer.
Its part, and to make sure that our air and water are cleaner, healthier,
Staying on the one, look, EPA has enormous responsibilities over an enormous number of areas. I'm focusing on picking up what Senator Whitehouse said. I worry very much. Do you have kids?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. I worry. Many of us have kids. We have grandchildren. This is serious stuff. This is beyond politics, my friends. This is the future of humanity. And if we do not get our act together, and that is not just the United States of America. This requires international cooperation. So let me ask you another difficult question. If tomorrow, magically, the United States Congress did all of the right things, that would not be enough. Climate change is a global crisis. It requires the cooperation of China, Russia, Europe, Latin America, etc. Are you prepared to represent the United States aggressively with some of your colleagues in reaching out to countries all over the world to cut carbon emissions?
Senator, it's very important for I, as administrator of EPA, whether traveling to the G7 or the G20 or elsewhere, to be reaching out to these other countries to make sure that there is a pressure on other nations to do their part as well. And it is my job to stay up at night, to lose sleep at night, to make sure that we are making our air and our water cleaner.
All right. I know it's fashionable to be beating up on China. It's good politics. They are now the major carbon polluter in the world. We have historically had that role. We're now number 2. We're not going to solve this crisis without working with China. Are you and hopefully your colleagues, if you are confirmed, prepared to work with China to try to lower carbon emissions?
Senator, on many different issues, it is important not just to be working with nations that we are the strongest aligned with, but to also be in communication and engaged in dialogue with countries that might be considered competitors and also our greatest adversaries. And right now, China is an adversary in many respects.
Okay.
Sorry to deviate, but I just saw this comment from Cheryl in chat. Dennis said that 7,000 people applied for the K2 battalion when they advertised they had positions because they trusted leadership. Look, this is the thing. In Ukraine, there's a recruitment problem, but there's a recruitment problem for much of the military, but not certain organizations. Azov doesn't have a recruiting problem. K2 doesn't have a recruiting problem. I don't know if Bertavii has a recruiting problem, but like a lot of these people who have good leadership and are given good equipment are not the ones with the recruiting problems. I've said this before. If you put somebody in a truck and give them an AK with 2 mags and a grenade and no anti-drone equipment and say, hold this position against an armored assault with minimal training, very few people are going to want to, volunteer for that. And I think a lot of people are going to go hide in the woods or hide from at least authorities in some way instead of go serve in that capacity, because at that point, all you're doing is just slowing the Russians down, aren't you? But at least from the view of a lot of people, like it's a death sentence. But if you're in a Bradley being transported to the front with anti-drone equipment, jammers, you've been given a good few months training to figure out what you're doing. You have a competent commander, both on a unit directly above you and at a broader scale above that. It'll be a little different. In fact, not a little different, it'll be a lot different. I know a lot of people who were always scared, and everybody's going to be scared going to war, but it was the throes of finding out what the Army was like that made them desert. Desertion's really gone up this year. Not only fear of death, but also a lot more people being recruited that didn't want to fight. Also seeing the dire state of a lot of the equipment they're being given, the lack of supply. If you given the right tools for the job, you might be more willing to do the job. This is the only point I'm trying to get across.
As part of the IRA, had a provision in there for, I believe, $7 billion to lower electric bills for working-class people all over this country by helping them install solar panels on their roof. We did it, my wife and I did it in our house. Our electric bill went down by 80%. Problem is many working-class, lower-income people can't afford the initial cost to install the solar panels. That's what this bill does. Can I have your word right now that you will work with me to make sure that that Solar for All program is rapidly and effectively implemented all over the country?
Senator, it is my obligation on this and every other law enacted by Congress that I will follow my obligations under the law. And when it comes to spending money, it is important that I have the ability to sit before you and account for every dollar that's being spent by the EPA. So I know that this is an important priority of you, and solar power.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Almost saved by the bell.
That was the fossil fuel industry.
I look forward to working with you on the Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What a
Congratulations.
way to end that. My goodness. What perfect comedic timing. It's like Bernie with the bird, man. Bernie is a master of timing. A master of timing. By the way, there was a lot of environmental and science questions that were thrown out during this, and I don't want to get into too much of the specifics, but there's a few examples here from the New Republic if you want to go read up on it, where Lee Zeldin is just showing that he doesn't have really that in-depth knowledge of the environment, and he's going to be doing a lot of learning on the job. Let me read some of these back and forths with you, just a few of them before we move on. First, as a matter of law, is carbon dioxide a pollutant? White House asked. As in, there's a senator named White House. I know. As far as carbon dioxide emitted from you during that question, I would say no. As far as carbon dioxide that is emitted in larger masses that we hear concerns about from scientists as well as from Congress, that's something that certainly needs to be focused on from the EPA. He's saying hearing concerns from scientists about carbon emissions released in mass. He's saying that is as if large-scale emissions of carbon dioxide by companies as pollutant during manufacturing process and elsewhere, and elsewise, is not necessarily damaging the environment. The jury's still out on it, but we're gonna focus on it. If you don't even acknowledge that there's a problem, it's hard to think that you take it really that seriously. And as a matter of law, is it designated as a pollutant? Senator, while carbon dioxide is not named as one of the 6 in the Clean Air Act, the EPA has been treating it as such, Zeldin replied. White House affirmed that the Supreme Court had determined that it is a pollutant and ought to be regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency. Zeldin appeared to treat that standard, which has been in place since 2007, with the skepticism of a technicality. Anyway, you can read more about this on here if you want to. Moving on, because we do have more we got to get through. I wanted to show you Pam Bondi. For those of you who don't know, Pam Bondi is the pick for Attorney General after Matt Gaetz fell through because of the terrible, terrible character flaws of pursuing the underage with money, with your friends. Anyway, I wanted to check out this replacement because Matt Gaetz was chosen with very little private experience as a lawyer and 0 public experience as a lawyer, purely because he's an attack dog and he's loyal. I firmly believe this. And Pam Bondi is now the new replaced pick. Very loyal. That requirement is still fulfilled. And I wanted to show you how she engaged with the Senate hearing and the questions that she answered that I thought were most interesting, or refused to answer in some instances. And the main takeaway I took from the Pam Bondi hearing is she is as loyal as Matt Gaetz to a T, and her legal knowledge is spotty when it comes to things like the 14th Amendment. And again, loyalty to a T. And every single time she was pushed on something, she'd either go into a trench to defend Donald Trump, sometimes when he wasn't even mentioned, and or she'd just divert. And it was very frustrating. So I wanted to show a few of these clips. First, Senator Adam Schiff, senator from California.
It also requires you, if you're going to be a good attorney general, to be able to tell hard truths to the president. So my question...
This is a basic one. I mean, this is, of course, not anything surprising for Trump world anymore. But can you tell the president that he lost an election? I know we're starting with the basics. This should be basic. But now this has been accepted, that this is standard, that his inner circle is just going to pretend that he won an election he lost.
Questions now are, can you tell hard truths to the president? So,
and like, think about this. If 2028 comes around and whoever's running then on the Republican side loses, these are the people in his inner circle who could say stuff like, yeah, no, we could just overturn that. Or, yeah, no, actually, I agree. It is all fake, even if it, obviously there's no evidence of any of the elections being just manipulated and overturned. And that's scary because these are going to be the people who are supposed to check him when this time he looked for loyalty much harder than last time. And last time there was quote-unquote adults in the room. This time it might be a little bit harder.
Questions now are, can you tell hard truths to the president? So let me start with an easy truth that you could speak to the president. Can you tell us, can you tell him that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election? Can you say that? Do you have the independence to say that? Do you have the gravitas, the stature, the intestinal fortitude to say, Donald Trump, you lost the 2020 election? Can you tell us that here today?
Senator, what I can tell you is I will never play politics. You're trying to engage me in a gotcha. I won't do it. I won't play politics.
What's a gotcha? Who won an election is a gotcha. Who won an election is a gotcha.
Any ongoing investigation,
so let me ask you another,
like you did leaking your colleague Devin Nunes's memo.
If you can't answer the question, let me ask you a different, what should be a simple truth, not a hard one. Was there massive fraud affecting the result of the 2020 election, yes or no?
Senator, I'm glad you asked that question, if you'll let me answer what I saw in Pennsylvania.
No, I asked a simple question.
Oh, yeah, she says that she saw massive fraud on a scale in Pennsylvania that would have overturned the election results. That's never been accredited or proven.
Question about massive fraud.
I can only tell you what I saw in Pennsylvania.
No, I know you want to answer a different question, but my question is, can you tell us whether there was massive fraud affecting the results of the 2020 election, yes or no? Was there or was there not?
I can tell you what I saw when I went as an advocate to the campaign.
That's not my question. So you can't answer that question. You can't speak that even easy truth to us, let alone to the president.
That's a basic one, but okay. let's hear it one more time just to get it across that she refuses to answer this question.
I want to ask you a factual question. Who won the 2020 presidential election?
Joe Biden is the president of the United States.
Ms. Bondi, you know.
She says it like she's going to get shot if she acknowledges that Joe Biden got 7 million more votes than Donald Trump. Donald Trump got 3 million more than Harris, by the way, so.
Know that there is a difference between acknowledging it and, I can say that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. I may not like it, but I can say it. You cannot say who won the 2020 presidential election. Okay. It's disturbing that you can't give voice to that fact.
Okay, here's another one. This one's interesting because Kash Patel is Trump's pick to head the FBI, and he is a very, 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 very partisan attack dog for Trump. And he says he said in the past that he has an enemies list, and he even posted lists of, we're going to it in a second. But he wants to arrest a lot of people. He wants to go after a lot of people, turn the FBI upside down, and go after Trump's enemies. And I don't know if I can go and get like a clip. I think maybe I will while this is playing of Kash Patel to get you across the vibe of what he wants with this hunt. But either way, Kash Patel did make an enemies list for Donald Trump. And when Pam Bondi was asked about it, she denied it. Even though, like, here it is. Members of the executive branch deep state. The list only includes current and former executive branch officials and is not exhaustive. It does, for example, include other corrupt actors of the First Order, such as Congressman Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, members of the Future Chief. Basically, he made a list of who he declared to be the deep state, including current congressmen. It's not really like a hard standard, because if you just become part of the deep state through democratic elections or like appointment, like what makes you part of the deep state? Just being like ideologically opposed to you, or like what is the boundaries by which is defined as the deep state outside of just opposition to Trump? But here it is: Atkinson Mitchell, Lloyd Austin, Brian Auten, Baker James, whatever. Listen to her.
Have hired someone into the Florida Attorney General's office who you knew had an enemies list.
Senator, to cut to the chase, you're clearly talking about Kash Patel. I don't believe he has an enemies list. He made a quote on TV, which I have not heard. I saw your sign, or Senator Durbin's sign, about Kash. But I know that Kash Patel has had 60 jury trials as a public defender, as a prosecutor. He has great experience in the Intel Department, Department of Defense. I have known Kash, and I believe that Kash is the right person at this time for this job. You'll have the ability to question Mr. Patel.
And I'm questioning you right now about whether you will enforce an enemies list that he announced publicly on television.
Oh, Senator, I'm sorry. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice.
Thank you. Have hired someone into the Florida Attorney General.
Do we have anything else on? I'll see if I can get a thing on Kash Patel quick, but I wanted to, as I get that thing on Kash Patel, to show you who Kash Patel is before we move on from Pam Bondi, politically loyal pick. I also wanted to include the fact, and this is true of many of the appointments that are being made, but I'll only show this testimony for Pam Bondi, and the reason purely is that, number one, this has not been hit on too much by Capitol Hill, just due to all of the other scandals. And I kind of want to show it because, it should be hit on more. We need to keep the standard high. But number two, this is also true for a lot of these people, like that they're all backed by many different special interests of nefarious origin who has hired them or has paid them to do their lobbying work before.
Client list is full of controversial clients, some of which stand to benefit directly from having their former lobbyist in charge of the DOJ. Over the last 5 years, she represented 30 clients, from large corporations and contractors to a foreign government. In addition, during her earlier time as Florida Attorney General, A recent New York Times review found several pieces of evidence that seem to demonstrate her general tendency to assist corporate allies and corporate lobbyists' strong belief that Bondi was exceptionally accessible to lobbyists and amenable to the agendas of their corporate clients. Bondi had a large number of domestic clients, but today I'll highlight just two. Geo Group, the nation's largest private prisons company, and Amazon, an e-commerce giant. Bondi was registered to lobby the first Trump White House in 2019 for Geo Group. Both DOJ and DHS inspectors general have been critical of prison management of Geo Group, and they stand to profit substantially if the Trump administration's new immigration detention and deportation policies result in filling empty or underutilized beds in their facilities. As a real precedent for this concern, Public Citizen did research back in 2019, which showed Geo Group's contract dollars rose by over 40% in the first 2 years of the Trump term. Now to Amazon. They're, of course, a very well-known tech company. Bondi was registered to lobby for them in 2020. In recent years, they've been investigated by the DOJ over injury rates and workplace safety at their warehouses, been referred to the DOJ by a bipartisan group of lawmakers for potential criminal obstruction, and had their robo-taxi unit federally investigated over safety concerns. In addition, DOJ and the FTC recently reached a settlement with Amazon regarding children's privacy violations via Alexa. And of course, Amazon also receives multi-billion-dollar contracts from multiple federal agencies, ranging from DoD to NASA. Beyond these examples of potential domestic entanglements, Bondi was registered as a foreign agent, lobbying on behalf of foreign governments and officials. To highlight just two, Bondi worked for both the Embassy of Qatar and a Kuwaiti investment firm.
Okay, I found the quote I was looking for of Kash Patel coming after, Trump's opponents. Here it is. We will find out, and this was him talking about what he would do if he was appointed in the second Trump administration. We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. And this was on Steve Bannon's podcast, by the way. Who would have thought? He was then asked by Bannon if you'd be able to deliver serious prosecution and accountability against their political opponents during a second Trump presidency. And he responded, "We're going to come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly. We'll figure that out." Criminally and civilly going after them. Bannon then followed this up by saying, "This is not just rhetoric. We're absolutely dead serious. You cannot have a constitutional republic and allow what these deep staters have done to this country." So, anyway, seems like a responsible guy. Let's make him the most powerful, let's make him a very powerful government official. Okay, one last one on Pam Bondi. Here is the 14th Amendment quote I was talking about.
The Constitution of the United States. Do you believe birthright citizenship is the law of the land, and will you defend it regardless of a child born in the United States, regardless of their parents' immigration status?
Senator, I will study birthright citizenship. I would love to meet with you regarding birthright citizenship.
Asking us to
Can I
continue
answer
to
the
serve as the
question?
Attorney General of the United States, and you still need to study the 14th Amendment of the Constitution? That is not helping me have more confidence in your ability to do this job. One other immigration-related question, I'll steer clear of the Constitution
I have one
and the law.
regarding that I'd like to
Senator
talk about.
Hirona asked you earlier, but I don't think you answered her question.
This is another thing with the Padilla one. She really, Padilla, I called her name Padilla, I don't know why. Pam Bondi. She really, tried to direct the conversation a lot. And she tried to grab the mantle as if she was the one asking the question. And I want to talk about this. I want to talk about it. And people were just not having it.
Can you please tell us, do you agree with the statement that immigrants are, quote, poisoning the blood of our country, yes or no?
I did not say that.
I did not say that you said that. I'm asking if you agree with it, yes or no.
I did not say that.
Do you?
Tough break. But, this is what's going to happen when you're running under his ticket. Also, by the way, you can have a totally different interpretation of all these events. And I kept this clip in at the end here, just to make sure that you guys all knew that you can interpret all of this very differently. Because I watched this clip, And I thought Pam Bondi came off here looking very bad. But this person getting 2.6 million views on X, over 77,000 likes. I believe this man has me blocked because I am the devil. They all think that Pam Bondi looked quite good here in this clip. Let me show you the clip that they thought that she looked good in, to give you an idea that I'm not trying to distort the viewpoint we're looking at here. It's just maybe a difference of perspective.
Job will be, I'm speaking, your job will be to protect voters and election workers, not to undermine and dox them. Now, I know that earlier you agreed that Joe Biden is in fact president, but many of the president-elect's inner circle continue to spread the big lie about the 2020 election. Then we'll move on to a different topic.
Senator, you were speaking. May I speak? You cut me off when I was speaking. When I ask you the next question, you can speak, and I hope you answer, Ms. Bondi. Well, I'd like to answer the previous one, Senator.
When we met yesterday,
you pointed your finger at me and said
you did not
you were
seem
speaking.
to be familiar
Let me answer my question. I'm not going to be bullied by you,
the
Senator
14th
Padilla.
Amendment of the United States of America, which was deeply disappointing.
I guess you
And I'm
didn't want to
hoping
hear
you're more
my
familiar
answer
with it
about
today
Pennsylvania.
after I gave an opportunity to study overnight. So can you tell me and this committee what the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment says?
Senator, I'm here to answer your questions. I'm not here to do your homework and study for you. If I am confirmed as Attorney
You're the one
General,
asking for a confirmation
hey,
vote,
you
ma'am.
cut me off. Can I please finish?
What does the 14th Amendment say?
Senator, the 14th Amendment, we all know, addresses birthright citizenship. I've been a state prosecutor. I've been a state AG. I look forward to, even given your remarks today, working with you and the people of California if I am confirmed as the 87th Attorney General of the United States of America. I didn't take your homework assignment. I'm sorry. I was preparing for today.
You know, what's interesting here is it's just they're trying to see the competency and viewpoints of the incoming Attorney General. These are not crazy questions. These really are not crazy questions. You could give an answer that they might not like, but these are not wild and completely out there questions to ask for somebody who is going to be the top law enforcement official in the entire country. And so to make sure, and like to ask questions of competency, even if you worked in government, after Trump just tried to appoint Matt Gaetz to this position, is not wild. It's really not wild. And like some of it is like, oh, I'll go study this, I'll go study. It's not, you shouldn't be saying that up here. You shouldn't be saying that. Now look, she is, I think, going to be appointed Attorney General. She's going to become Attorney General. She's going to get confirmed and get through. And the reason why is she has the same positive for Trump that Matt Gaetz had of being fiercely loyal. And as you can see here, she is also an attack dog, another trait he wanted out of an Attorney General. And if you have those two things together, and know that, again, like this position's coming from Trump, it's from being in Trump's circles, from Trump's favor, so she is going to be reliant on Trump's favor for continuing to have this position. Pam Bondi is basically Matt Gaetz. She's the same person. She's female Matt Gaetz. She's a woman. She's woman Matt Gaetz, or Matt Gaetz is male Pam Bondi, depending on your viewpoint. They are politically loyal, attack dog that is his career is heavily reliant upon Donald Trump's continued support. And as we could see, when his support dropped for Matt Gaetz, bye-bye. So from Trump's perspective, I mean, nothing's really changed here. The real big difference that I think makes it so Pam's going to get appointed and going to get through where Matt Gaetz did not is the fact that, number one, we do not know if Matt Gaetz sleeping with any underage people, paying to do so. Rumors of her chasing Viagra with Red Bull to go all night at parties, or showing nudes to other. We don't have scandals like this. The scandals with Pam Bondi are going to be things like, hey, look at all the groups she's lobbied for these private prisons. You know, just the typical Republican scandal, I guess you could say. Scandal is putting it too aggressively, even. So I think that when you add the experience of her actually having worked in government from a legal perspective, minus the scandal, but keep all the same attributes from Matt Gaetz, you get all of the same, if not all of the same, negative attributes of Matt Gaetz being Attorney General, outside of the one fact of him being a sex pest. You get the devoted loyalty to Trump, not being able to, your political career basically being dependent upon Trump. Somebody who is going to do what he asks when he asks it. And I don't think is going to push back on him much. And if put in another situation like in 2020, I am far less confident that she is going to say to the president, like the previous attorney general did, sorry, Mr. President, it looks like you lost. We just got to, we got to do what we got to do. So, same problem, different person, better odds for her. Now, the two outstanding cases that we haven't been able to touch on really yet is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard. And the reason why, Tulsi Gabbard for DNI pick, which is the top intelligence official in the country, and RFK for Health and Human Services. Now, I believe it was Health and Human Services. Now, their hearings have not been scheduled yet with the Senate, so we don't know when that's happening. Why hasn't it been scheduled yet with the Senate? We don't know. The Trump campaign hasn't said. Trump hasn't said. The people around him haven't said. Tulsi hasn't said. RFK hasn't said. Nobody said around them, so we have no clue. I would presume, I would suppose, I would say that it's likely that RFK's odds are a little stiffer than Marco Rubio. Little Marco, Big Marco, whatever you want to call him. He's not friends with people on the Hill as much. He has a lot of crazy theories that he can just not back up. He can say some crazy nonsense out there, but he can't really back it up because a lot of it's just nonsense. He has a ton of PR problems that makes anybody pushing him through feel weird, and it probably could have negative effects. Maybe not within the party, but down the line, maybe. But the biggest problem is if you appoint this guy and then he actually messes it up and you're the ruling party, what do you do when you have another health problem where you're going to have to deal with, say, another pandemic or some real health and human services type work, and you got to rely on RFK, who has a terrible record and is not particularly, maybe not on every single health issue, but particularly the most respected health voice in the world due to the nonsense he said about vaccines and the nonsense he said about many other things like fluoride and otherwise. And for Tulsi, I think it's people being worried about the security threat. That Tulsi Gabbard was a frequent guest on Russian state TV. Tulsi Gabbard visited Assad's Syria before Assad thankfully collapsed. She did some propaganda for the Russians when it comes to talking about, biolaboratories in Ukraine, making the Russians scared, and just complete nonsense that she regurgitated. And I wonder if her being a former Democrat and just jumping over into the party also makes all of these already rough issues just that much more rougher. But Trump really likes her, so I think he's still going to try to push her through. And I think Trump will probably try to push RFK through. But Trump's not, Trump's backstabbed people before. And I mean, RFK needs Trump much more than Trump needs RFK. And the same goes for Tulsi. So we'll just have to see, because if he can't get the votes, he can't get the votes. And both of them would be better replaced with more mindful picks. Do, 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 do.